Hi, I am Carlo Gallo, founder of Enquirisk. We help businesses assess the impact of political, socioeconomic, security, and cultural factors on their operations around the world. Here I would like to give you a few practical tips that in my experience are worth following when you are trying to forecast how political or geopolitical developments may affect businesses. Tip number 1. Start from the end. By which I mean, start by gaining a fairly detailed understanding of how the client operates or hopes to operate in any given industry or jurisdiction. That initial exercise ideally would be based on a direct dialogue with the client, and it should highlight the critical elements of a client's operations and plans. For example, are there any particular vulnerabilities or critical components in the chain of inputs, processes, and outputs that the client's business has to rely on in order to be successful? They may include certain raw materials or components or other critical inputs that go into the client's production process. By starting from the end, in other words, starting from a detailed, deep understanding of what makes the client's operations tick, analysts make sure that their research and analysis is tightly relevant to that client, as opposed to simply writing up all that they know about the risk profile of a country or industry. So before starting any research or writing, take a step back and make a conscious effort to learn as much as possible about the kinds of outcomes that would be most consequential for the client. This is a little bit similar to the concept of reverse engineering, if you will. Tip number 2. Intent and capabilities. When considering intentional actors as sources of threats, make sure to analyze both their intent and capabilities. This is similar to the willingness and opportunity framework in international relations. Both intent and capabilities need to be present, or the threat is not credible. For example, a terrorist group may issue threats which reflect their intent to strike certain targets, but they may lack the organizational resources, know-how, manpower, financing to pull those attacks off. This is also related to the need to account for systemic conditions that apply in the political and economic system that the client wants to operate in. Although the media tend to focus on personalities, their loud statements and dramatic actions, it is often those background conditions, those structural, systemic conditions that make or break a certain policy or make a certain promise to reform, for example, say corruption, more or less credible. Tip number 3. Avoid mirror imaging. When analyzing intentions, we need to resist mirror imaging, which is the assumption that foreign leaders and other foreign players would think like us. In other words, the assumption that they would value the same goals that we would, or that they would take similar steps to reach those goals as we would, that their analysis of costs and benefits is how we would do it. For example, it may be plausible to assume that all political leaders want to win and maintain political power. However, leaders in authoritarian regimes can pursue that goal with much less regard for public opinion, at least in the short term, compared to leaders in competitive political systems. So to impute the same kind of thinking, the same kind of strategies and rationale to authoritarian leaders as would apply in a more competitive system is fundamentally mistaken. Tip number 4. Beware of quick extrapolation from breaking news. When something very dramatic happens, analysts are expected to assess its significance right away. For example, is this rebellion the start of a coup? Is this labor strike about to spread nationwide? Is this terrorist attack the start of a new terrorist campaign? In order to approach these questions, it is helpful to think about the additional elements that also need to occur if this one event is to lead to the momentous consequences that many commentators rush to predict. Typically, there is a whole chain of events that needs to unfold in order for that one event to lead to those dramatic consequences that people seem to rush into predicting. Often we just don't know. The problem is that it takes expertise even to know what kind of bits of information we need in order to draw that kind of causal chain that could potentially connect the breaking news event of today with the more escalatory developments of tomorrow. Tip number 5. Recognize the limits of forecasting. In political risk analysis, we are often dealing with social and political processes that can be extremely complex, particularly when we are looking at an extended time horizon, say for example 5, 10 years or even beyond that. In open systems such as political, social, economic, international systems, even a well-understood development can have important unintended repercussions and can be subject to many unforeseen interactions with other developments. In some cases, the best we can do is to highlight in very broad terms the kinds of dynamics that are likely to play a role in shaping outcomes of interest. So these are 5 tips. In our skills training services, we delve into a lot more detail. We identify the different analytical strategies that are appropriate for different types of political risk analysis tasks. We propose a systematic approach to checking various types of assumptions that are often left implicit in narrative-style risk assessments. We also go into what's involved in producing quantitative risk indices that are credible, that have a logical foundation to them, and that are useful. Finally, we run practical exercises and workshops to make sure that analysts fully understand and internalize the concepts that we talk about. So if you would like to have a more detailed conversation about some of these methodological issues, certainly get in touch. The idea is to come up with a more systematic and rigorous way of doing the job.